Honorable Philip Telesford, Minister of Social and Community Development, Housing and Gender Affairs. Senator the Honorable Gloria Thomas, Minister of State with responsibility for social development and gender affairs. Honorable Andy Williams, Minister for Mobilization, Implementation, and Transformation. Mrs. Veronica Charles, Permanent Secretary with responsibility for social development and gender affairs. Ms. Perron Johnson, Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Mobilization, Implementation, and Transformation. Dr. Miriam Aline, EnGenDer Project Manager. Dr. Kurt Prosper, EnGenDer National Focal Point, St. Lucia. Mrs. Hilary Gabriel, Project Coordinator, Grenada National Council of the Disabled. Deborah Kojo, Political Officer, British High Commission. Colleagues from various ministries, other invited guests, good afternoon. I am Samuel St. Bernard, the Planning Officer in the Ministry of Social and Community Development, Housing and Gender Affairs, and I will be this afternoon's chairperson for the official launch of the EnGenDer project. At this time, I'm going to invite everyone to stand as I say a word of prayer. Father, Lord, we give you praise and thanks. Thank you for affording us the opportunity to gather together so that we can officially launch the EnGenDer project. Thank you, Lord, for the support of our developmental partners, our local counterparts, my ministry colleagues who have worked hard in achieving this developmental milestone. I pray, Father God, that you will bless us as a collective as we work together to achieving the common good for this nation. I pray, Father God, that you will take charge of today's proceedings and the implementation of the project. We commit all into your mighty hands. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. So we're here to officially launch the EnGenDer project. The project, the acronym stands for Enabling Gender Responsive Disaster Recovery, Climate and Environmental Resilience in the Caribbean. The project will assist with the institutionalization of gender-responsive disaster risk management, gender-inclusive resilience, climate and environmental resilience, inclusive gender equality of climate risk, national climate change, disaster risk coordination, etc. And at this time, I'm going to go straight into the meat of the matter. I'm going to invite our permanent secretary, who's going to give the welcoming remarks. Welcome Ms. Veronica Charles to the podium.
Thank you very much, Mr. St. Bernard. Honorable Philip Telesford, Minister of Social and Community Development, Housing and Gender Affairs, with specific responsibility for housing and community development. Honorable Andy Williams, Minister for Mobilization, Implementation, and Transportation. Senator the Honorable Gloria Thomas, Minister of State with responsibility for social development and gender affairs. Ms. Perron Johnson, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Mobilization, Implementation, and Transformation. Dr. Miriam Aline, EnGenDer Project Manager. Dr. Kurt Prosper, EnGenDer National Focal Point, St. Lucia. Ms. Deborah Kodjo, Political Officer, British High Commission. Ms. Hilary Gabriel, National Coordinator, GNCD. Ladies and gentlemen, the media, good afternoon. On behalf of the Government of Grenada and the Ministry of Social and Community Development, Housing and Gender Affairs, I wish to extend a warm welcome to the team from UNDP, Global Affairs Canada, British High Commission, Grenada National Council of the Disabled, officials from the Ministry of Climate Resilience, Ministry of Mobilization, key stakeholders, and all the staff of the Ministry of Social and Community Development, Housing and Gender Affairs. To all participants of the training, welcome, welcome. I welcome you to the launch of the Enabling Gender Responsible Disaster Recovery, Climate and Environmental Resilience EnGenDer project in the Caribbean. Government's vision is a sustainable, equitable, and prosperous Grenada for all. This envisages Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique, a nation that embraces diversity and practices tolerance at all times. A nation where the government is protected, where the environment is protected and preserved for the use and enjoyment of present and future generations. No one will be left behind. To achieve this vision, however, collaboration is extremely necessary and critical amongst all agencies, ministries, and departments involved in gender, climate change, and disability. It is my hope that we will be able to continue with the implementation throughout, and by the time we are finished, many more will catch the vision and come on board, especially with financing. We must join efforts to create change in individual behavior and to start the process of developing a better Grenada for generations to come. Once again, I welcome you, and I extend heartfelt thanks to the government and people of Canada, the government and people of the United Kingdom, the UNDP, and all our partners for your support in this very important project. I look forward to working with all of you. May God bless us all. Thank you.
Thank you, P.S. Charles. A vision of a prosperous, equitable society. Environmental protection for the present and future generations. And joint efforts as we do it together. At this time, I'm going to invite the Honorable Senator Gloria Thomas, Minister of State with responsibility for social development and gender affairs. Let's welcome her, please.
Thank you, Mr. St. Bernard. Honorable Philip Telesford, Minister for Social and Community Development, Housing and Gender Affairs. Honorable Minister Andy Williams, Minister for Mobilization, Implementation, and Transformation. P.S. Veronica Charles, in the Ministry of Social Development and Gender Affairs. P.S. Perrin Johnson, in the Ministry of Mobilization, Implementation, and Transformation. Dr. Mariam Allen, EnGenDer Project Coordinator. Deborah Kojo, Political Officer, British High Commission, Grenada. Ms. Hilary Gabriel, Grenada National Council of the Disabled, Project Coordinator. Officials and partners from other organizations, other specially invited guests, recipients of the program, members of the media, pleasant good afternoon to all. Today is indeed a very special day for us as we launch the Enabling Gender Responsive Disaster Recovery, Climate and Environmental Resilient Project. Here in Grenada, we recognize that there is a gender bias inequality in the experience and exposure of women and girls to the adverse impact of disaster and climate change. Evidence from post-Hurricane Ivan and other natural disasters and climate change has shown that women and girls, children face greater challenge in accessing resources for adaptation, which significantly impact the recovery process. The difference in developmental outcomes for women and girls, boys are significantly impacted by the persuasive structural inequality. The government acknowledges that adaptive, gender-responsive, inclusive actions are critical to sustainable development outcomes in Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique. The EnGenDer project is poised to provide viable solutions through implementation of strategies to support climate change, disaster risk reduction, and environmental management interventions. EnGenDer's focus of prioritizing the vulnerable as it relates to climate change adaptation and mitigation with the intention of increasing their resilience is aligned to the transformational agenda. This project will help service providers to improve efficient service delivery, accelerate post-disaster recovery, and risk mitigation. This initiative will empower the government to take ownership of disaster risk and exposure with better institutional arrangements. This will also address possible large-scale recovery needs that are shock responsive and better offer social protection finance for the most vulnerable. Implementation of the EnGenDer project is important to the ministry as the deliverables will signal an improvement of the quality of life for vulnerable populations whom we serve. It will address the lack of consideration of persons with disability in Grenada's policy and program. The ministry identified targeted interventions that are priority areas of focus for persons with disability. The major interventions include capacity building and livelihood training for people with disability, at-risk youth, and women. It also includes development of disability policies and action plan, and the construction of a responsive climate-smart multipurpose center. Today, As we officially launch the EnGenDer project, we appreciate your commitment to support climate change, disaster risk reduction, and environmental management interventions in Grenada. On behalf of my government, I extend thanks to the implementing partners, UNDP representatives from the public sector and civil society organizations. We are grateful for your support and valuable partnership and look forward to continued collaboration as we strive to improve the lives of the vulnerable in our society. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Sustainable development for climate resilience, prioritizing the vulnerable in response to closing the gaps of inequality. Thanks once again, Minister. At this time, I'm going to invite Mrs. Hilary Gabriel, the project coordinator for Grenada National Council of the Disabled. Let's welcome her. And she's no stranger to these kinds of forums. She has been a champion for the cause of the disabled for a very, very long time.
Good afternoon. Honorable Philip Telesford, Minister of Social Development, Housing and Gender Affairs, Senator Honorable Gloria Thomas, Minister of State with responsibility for social development and gender affairs, Honorable Andy Williams, Minister of Mobilization, Implementation and Transformation, Mrs. Veronica Charles, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Social Development and Gender Affairs, Ms. Perron Johnson, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Mobilization, Implementation and Transformation, Dr. Mariam Aline, EnGenDer Project Manager, Dr. Kurt Prosper, EnGenDer National Focal Point, St. Lucia, and Ms. Deborah Kojo, Political Officer, British High Commission, our colleagues from all walks of life within our beautiful trial and state. Good day. Every year from May 1st to 31st, the Grenada National Council of the Disabled celebrates May Month of Awareness. A theme is selected surrounding persons with disabilities, and different activities forms part of the month's celebration. Our Ministry of Social Development and Community, Housing and Gender Affairs is also part of this long celebration. I say this to say that it was not by accident that the government of Grenada was approved to implement developmental activities which focus on the nexus of persons with disabilities, climate change, and disaster risk reduction under the EnGenDer project. The thrust to design and construct a responsive, climate-smart, multipurpose center is a welcomed initiative for GNCD, as Grenada will be well poised to continue enhancing the lives of persons with disabilities. This state-of-the-art building will definitely increase training opportunities, among other activities, for the community of persons we serve with disabilities. GNCD applauds the EnGenDer project activities, which includes the building capacity and livelihood training for persons with disabilities, support to students with disabilities, and sign language training for first responders. These initiatives demonstrate state's commitment to building an inclusive society for all. A project of this magnitude warrants high commendation to those who really stood the test. Those persons who said yes, and not only just said yes, but played the yes game right to the end. I would not start calling names, but the person or persons whom I'm speaking about is fully aware of what I've just said. In conclusion, The GNCD takes this opportunity to sincerely thank the EnGenDer project and the government of Grenada, our supporters, well-wishers, our family, for this noble initiative, long overdue, but it is here. And before I leave, I'd just like to leave a few words from a poem which was written by one of our colleagues with disabilities. We can have all the money in the world, and we do not know how to spend it. That is a disability. We have all the love in the world, and we do not share it. That is a disability. We have all the riches in the world, and we do not share it. That is a disability. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gabriel. Very powerful poem. You can have all the love in the world, and if you do not share it, that is a disability. Wow. Solid. Thank you. Thank you. At this time, we will be viewing a video. So wait for the technicians to load up that video. It's a video from Miss Limia El Tayab, resident representative, UNDP Barbados and the Eastern Caribbean Islands.
Greetings, everyone. Greetings, everyone. I'm super happy to be with you today at the launch of Enabling Gender Responsive Disaster and Risk Management Program, the sub-project in Grenada focusing on persons with disabilities. I haven't been to Grenada yet. I still have to present my credentials, but this is an important and landmark program, and I'm happy to be a part of it and that UNDP is a part of it. Today, we live in a time of incredible flux and change, incredible crisis upon crisis, where we need to look at climate change, we need to look at disaster and risk management, and we need to look at how we manage livelihoods while poverty is increasing, fuel prices are increasing, food prices are increasing. And it's within this context that we have to safeguard the most marginalized and the most vulnerable within our communities and societies. Climate change knows no boundaries and does not differentiate between who it hits. However, the impacts of climate change are very much differentiated, and the impacts of disaster are also differentiated. And those who are worst impacted are usually the poorest in our societies. Yet, within these conflicting times, with conflicting priorities in every government, in every community, in every local government, we find that less and less priority is being placed on those most disadvantaged. We know in Grenada from Hurricanes Irma and Emily that have hit in the past, that is those who were the poorest that were hit the hardest. And this is a reality of the world we live in today. The 2011 population census in Grenada has shown that 14% of Grenadians are people living with disabilities. Of this number, 8,796 are women and 5,859 are men. Within those also, the woman is a larger population. Therefore, the nexus between climate, disability, disaster becomes a very important nexus for us to look at. And I'm super happy that the partnership brought together today in this program, led under the leadership of the government of Grenada and under the EnGenDer UNDP implemented program, in partnership with the government of Canada and the government of the UK, is specifically addressing this nexus. Super happy that we're doing this in this partnership and this collaboration, and I know we will have great success. What do we intend to do through this program? The whole principle of the program is to integrate human rights and gender into issues of climate action, resilience to be able to manage and respond to disasters and risks, and focusing on the lives, livelihoods, and sustainable futures of people with disabilities. So bringing the three nexuses together and addressing it. We all know that when you are in the poorest strata of society, the different risks and challenges you face are like an onion. You have to peel all of them if you are to escape and really come out of these barriers. It's not enough to tackle one issue, one or the other. You have to tackle both disaster and resilience and climate change, but you also have to tackle livelihoods. You also have to tackle education. You have to tackle employment, because all of these factors are pulling us back as a community. And it's within this context that today we are launching this sub-program that specifically focuses on persons with disabilities. Let me take a moment to commend the government of Grenada, because they have had the foresight to ensure that we have a human rights principle and approach at the core of what we're doing. They have also had the foresight to make sure that we're integrating gender, but we're also integrating issues of persons with disabilities in national planning. And so what will we specifically focus on? First of all, we're going to do a gender responsive feasibility and environmental assessment. So that will be task number 1, as well as establishing a National Disability Resource Center, which will hopefully allow persons with disabilities a voice and a space and a venue. And it will ensure that it can be used for other groups as well, whether they are youth groups, women, or to address issues of disaster management and risk management. Thirdly, there will be policy action. We are specifically going to launch a national disability policy and action plan, creating the policy framework within which these issues will be addressed. And fourth and not least, maybe the most important, we are going to have 63 beneficiaries that will benefit from startup, training, equipment, as well as mentoring and capacity building. A few specific areas have been highlighted, even though it's wider, but specifically aquiculture, hydroponics, and solar drying are a few of the issues that the beneficiaries are looking at. Any startup needs startup kits, not just training and capital. So making sure that they have feasibility and financial plans in terms of how feasible their startup is, making sure that we give them the new technologies and access to new ways of doing things and opening them up to the digital world as much as possible, as well as any other special training needs that are needed to make sure that these startups are a success. None of this, as I said at the beginning, would have been possible without the broad partnership that UNDP has created under this program. The persons with disabilities themselves and their different civil society organizations. Another issue that I think is important to support so that they have more voice. The partnership with the government of Grenada and the Ministry of Social Planning and Development Planning in particular. Let me mention the two donors, but our partnership with them is not a funding partnership. It's a vision and collaboration and having the same principles as the three of us, UNDP, the Government of Canada, and the Government of the UK. Let me specifically mention Global Affairs Canada and the Department of Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office. It's only through such partnerships that we are able to deliver. In this particular case, over $300,000 will be granted for this sub-program. And as UNDP, we're super honored and proud to walk this path with you. And you can count on our continued support during and after this program ends. Thank you very much. I wish you all the success.
Office Barbados. All right. We're gonna be viewing another video at this time. It's gonna be His Excellency
Greetings.
Lena Chatterjee, High Commission, Global Affairs, Canada.
Greetings, Honorable Prime Minister, Ministers, Permanent Secretaries, Development Partners, colleagues, and the people of Grenada. Thank you for inviting me to participate in the launch of a gender-responsive climate and disaster risk management project in Grenada that is targeted towards persons with disabilities. I regret I cannot join in person. Climate change is having the largest impact on the world's poorest and most vulnerable people. Within this group, 20% are persons with disabilities who are most often doubly disadvantaged. They are often marginalized and their needs inadvertently not taken into consideration when planning. The onset of the COVID-19 pandemic further compounded the situation, deepening the challenges faced by persons with disabilities. Sadly, this group has lower outcomes in education, employment, and health compared to other population groups. Imagine, only 10% of persons with disabilities in the Caribbean are employed. Policy development and interventions at all levels need to address the specific circumstances of persons with disabilities in relation to climate change, together with those of their families. Canada is committed to supporting the rights of persons with disabilities through its interactions with other countries. We also work through advocacy in multilateral fora and through our international development assistance programming. This is evident through our projects such as EnGenDer. At present, there is no dedicated persons with disability responsive facility. This project will support the establishment of such a center that can make a specific contribution to Grenada's National Gender Equality Policy and Action Plan. It will help increase public awareness of men's and women's complementary roles in the sustainable development of the country's natural resources. At the same time, it will act as a resource center for a range of other activities, including youth activities and training. The project will support the livelihoods of persons with disabilities through the provision of apiculture, hydroponics, and solar drying training programs. It will also support the development of a national disability policy and action plan. Canada, through EnGenDer, is supporting inclusive resilience for Grenada in several other ways. Through the offer of complementary funding, EnGenDer is supporting the Government of Grenada to advance its efforts for low-carbon electric mobility. Through UN Women, a gender inequality of disaster and climate risk and cost of inaction study recommended that Grenada's subsequent national adaptation plan and all sector plans are gender responsive and informed by gender and sex disaggregated data. The Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, CDEMA, will work with Grenada to develop and implement a gender-responsive recovery capacity building program. I'd like to congratulate the Government of Grenada, UNDP, UN Women, the World Food Programme, CDEMA, and all other partners who have contributed to the progress and success of this project to date. I'd especially like to thank the groups who provided the leadership necessary to initiate this project, including the Ministry of Infrastructure, Ministry of State with responsibility for social development and gender affairs, the Ministry of Education, and the Grenada National Council of the Disabled. The last 2.5 years have proven to be quite challenging. The global COVID-19 pandemic and hurricanes have reminded us how important it is to invest in our ability to prepare, respond, and then recover. This project will do just that. I'm sending you my warmest, best wishes. Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
Let's applaud the contribution of the Canada High Commission and by extension the Canadian government. Well appreciated. This time I'm going to invite Ms. Deborah Kodjo, the political officer the British High Commission, Grenada. Let's welcome her.
The Honorable Philip Telesford, Minister for Social Development, Community Development, Housing and Gender Affairs. Senator the Honorable Gloria Thomas, Minister of State with responsibility for Social Development and Gender Affairs. Honorable Andy Williams, Minister for Mobilization, Implementation and Transformation. Mrs. Veronica Charles, Permanent Secretary with responsibility for Social Development and Gender Affairs. Ms. Perrin Johnson, Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Mobilization, Implementation and Transformation. Dr. Miriam Aline, EnGenDer Project Manager. Mrs. Hilary Gabriel, Grenada National Council of the Disabled, Project Coordinator. Good afternoon to everyone, and thank you for having me today. The UK government is pleased to partner with the Government of Canada and UNDP through the EnGenDer Responsive Disaster Recovery, Climate and Environmental Resilience in the Caribbean project, otherwise known as EnGenDer, to promote opportunities for women, youth, and persons living with disabilities for training. Not only are the industries in sustainable livelihoods, which will provide work opportunities, but also will be producing products that will move Grenada closer to their adaptation goals while earning income sustainably and independently. The unequal distribution of climate impacts mean that all parts of society must be involved in decision-making, particularly the most vulnerable. EnGenDer rightly acknowledges that adaptation action should follow a country-driven, gender-responsive, participatory, and fully transparent approach, taking into consideration vulnerable groups, communities, and ecosystems, ensuring that we leave no one behind. When all members of society are involved in decision-making and mutual accountability that values all contributions to generate shared solutions, only then can we see more innovation and inclusive problem solving. The United Kingdom is firmly committed to helping the Caribbean region to build resilience to the effects of climate change, which is why several new programs were announced in Glasgow at COP26 in November 2021. This upcoming week, we hand over the COP presidency to Egypt as we continue to strive to keep 1.5 degrees alive. I wish you all best of luck going forward, and thank you for inviting me to participate in this event today.
Thank you, Ms. Kojo. And again, we would like you to echo our thanks and appreciation to the British High Commission Office. It's well appreciated. This time I'm going to invite Dr. Aline, who's going to do the official handing over of the equipment and supplies for that aspect of the project. I'll invite you to the podium so that you can do and witness the official handover. This is just a portion of the stuff on display. There is also some equipment outside. At the end of the ceremony, we invite you can have a look. Perhaps it might be something you may be interested in the future. So please do have a look. Dr. Aline.
Ladies and gentlemen, protocol established, good afternoon. On behalf of UNDP and the EnGenDer project, we'd like to hand over some sustainable livelihood equipment focusing on apiculture, hydroponics, as well as solar drying, and also some enhancing equipment for the School of the Deaf. At this moment, I'd like to invite the ministers. We could probably do a photo op to hand over some of the boxes as just a symbol of the handover from UNDP to the government of Grenada and vice versa to the beneficiaries.
Thank you, ministers. Dr. Aline. Honorable Andy Williams, you will be doing a demonstration? Because I heard you were asking if you have to put the suit on. Oh, okay. All right. All right. So at this time, I'd like to invite the Honorable Philip Telesford, Minister for Social Development and Social and Community Development, Housing and Gender Affairs. Let's welcome the Minister, please.
Good afternoon, everybody. I greet you well after lunch. I trust that you're able to keep up. Yeah. Senator, the Honorable Gloria Thomas, Minister of State with responsibility for social development and gender affairs, Honorable Andy Williams, Minister for Mobilization, Implementation, and Transformation, Mrs. Veronica Charles, Permanent Secretary with responsibility for social development and gender affairs, Ms. Perron Johnson, Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Mobilization, Implementation, and Transformation, Dr. Miriam Lane, EnGenDer Project Manager, Dr. Kurt Prosper, EnGenDer National Focal Point, St. Lucia, and Deborah Gajo, Political Officer, British High Commission. Good afternoon. I make remarks this afternoon in my capacity as Minister for Social and Community Development, Housing and Gender Affairs, but more specifically so on behalf of the Prime Minister, who is not able to be with us this afternoon. On this auspicious launch of the EnGenDer project, EnGenDer project. I omitted Sister Hilary Gabriel. I refer to you as a champion for those who need us most, the disabled or the differently abled. Blessings to you. So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and I welcome you again to the official launch of the Enabling Gender Responsive Disaster Recovery, Climate and Environment Resilience EnGenDer in the Caribbean. I bring you greetings on behalf of the Prime Minister, Deacon Mitchell, who regrettably can't be with us this afternoon. This government's vision is a nation transformed into an eco-friendly, fair, equitable, dynamic, prosperous, and stable democracy, capable of sustaining a high quality of life for all its citizens. A nation where the environment is protected and preserved for the use and enjoyment of present and future generations. The government of Grenada is committed to the sustainable management of our natural resources, climate change mitigation and adaptation, biodiversity and habitat protection, pollution prevention and control are key policy priorities for our government. To accomplish these objectives, increased emphasis will be placed on policies and activities to protect our environment, particularly our coastal waters, actions to mitigate against the degradation of our lands, preserve and protect the quality of our water supply, and the promotion of balance between human needs and environmental sustainability. Added to the vision of environmental transformation, the government is committed to food security and building resilience. The introduction of modern agricultural technology to promote sustainable agriculture is also a critical focal point for the government. The EnGenDer project, therefore, which ultimate outcome is to support, improve climate resilience for women and girls, and key vulnerable population and future generations in the Caribbean. Sustainable action is critical and must be embedded in national and regional decision making. This strategic approach is aligned to the government's transformational agenda, as articulated by our Honorable Prime Minister. The COVID-19 pandemic has taught the international community and us locally the value of cooperation, the value of timely exchange of information and sharing of resources. Therefore, it is imperative that the matter of climate change be escalated to the same level as that of urgency. And we understand what is happening in the north, or if you might say, northeast of us. Further, our Prime Minister called on young people to be agents of change rather than victims of climate change. In other words, if we don't change, or if we are not the agents of change, we are going to become the victims of change. The collaborative approach identified by the Prime Minister is mirrored within this EnGenDer project management, where UNDP, UN Women, CIDIMA, and WFP are seen to be collaborative partners. And this government plays its role. This approach lends itself to relevant context, expertise, and experience, providing oversight for multiple focus areas. Leveraging the result from the Japan-Caribbean Climate Change Partnership, JCCP, EnGenDer will add value in the articulation and implementation of gender-responsive adaptation and mitigation actions. Climate change impacts have compounded existing socioeconomic vulnerabilities, since the gender equality and human rights are rarely given the consideration required in climate change mitigation and adaptation, and in disaster risk recovery and response. Government acknowledge that adaptive, gender-responsive, inclusive actions are critical to sustainable development outcomes in Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique, or as the Prime Minister would say, Petite Martinique, Carriacou, and Grenada. The EnGenDer project is poised to provide valuable solutions through implementation of strategies to support climate change, disaster risk reduction, and environmental management interventions. EnGenDer will integrate gender equality and human rights-based approaches into disaster risk reduction, climate change adaptation and environmental management frameworks and interventions, and identify and address some of these gaps to ensure equal access to solutions. This includes identifying sectors for climate action where there can be significant benefits to vulnerable populations, improving the institutional mechanism for accelerating post-disaster recovery for the most vulnerable, creating space for their voices in decision-making. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for sacrificing your evening, your afternoon, after I assumed a very delicious lunch to be here with us this evening. Thank you for your commitment and your support as we forge together with our transformative agenda in our government to bring change to those who need it most, paying particular attention to the vulnerable population and our environment. Thank you, and God bless you all.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. A nation transformed into an eco-friendly, equitable, prosperous, sustainable society. Sustainable actions is critical. We need to value the cooperation in this agenda. Be the change rather than victim of the change. Inclusive action, critical. Create the space for the voices of the vulnerable. Thank you once again, Minister. At this time, I'm going to invite Dr. Aline one more time to give us the vote of thanks this afternoon. Let's welcome her.
Ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed, good afternoon again. Today, our collective presence for the opening ceremony serves as an historic opportunity to undertake transformative change and invest in development that creates a greener, healthier, and more inclusive future for the most vulnerable groups, specifically persons with disabilities. This would certainly not be possible without key stakeholders. It is therefore my privilege to have been asked to propose a vote of thanks on this occasion. Thank you. On behalf of the United Nations Development Programme and the EnGenDer Project, I must mention our deep sense of appreciation to Ms. Lilligan Chatterjee, High Commissioner of Canada in Barbados, and Ms. Deborah Cujo, Political Officer with the British High Commission, Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, United Kingdom, for the commitment of the governments of Canada and the UK through the financial support to ensure that the gender equality and human rights-based approaches are effectively and efficiently integrated into disaster risk reduction, climate change adaptation, and environmental management frameworks and interventions. I would like to express our sincere thanks to Ms. Limia L. Tieb, Resident Representative, and Mr. Delvin Mason, EnGenDer's National Focal Point for Grenada, for their leadership and guidance in support of the design and implementation of these gender-responsive climate adaptation strategies and actions. I also wish to express our gratitude to Senator the Honorable Gloria Thomas, Minister of State with responsibility for social development and gender affairs, Honorable Philip Telsford, Minister with responsibility for community development and housing, and the Honorable Minister Andy Williams, Minister for Mobilization, Implementation and Transformation, Permanent Secretary Ms. Veronica Charles, Permanent Secretary Ms. Perrone Joseph, Permanent Secretary Ms. Rhonda Jones, Ms. Jacinta Alexis, Senior Program Officer, Ms. Tisha Victor, Mr. Samuel St. Bernard, Ms. Esther Thomas, Mr. Kiza Charles, and Dr. Kelvin George, and other senior government officials for your dedication to an ambitious, coordinated, and innovative approach to climate change action, which understands sustainable development through the lens of the engendered inequalities, is admirable. We'd also like to extend our gratitude to the Grenada National Council for the Disabled Board of Representatives, with special mention of Ms. Hilary Gabriel, as well as Ms. Leslie Roberts, acting principals for the School of the Deaf, and her teachers, for their collaborative engagement, technical guidance, and unwavering support. I would also like to extend thanks to the wonderful team who has provided the logistical support and decorative services that made this day possible. To the members of the press, videographers, and photographers, Mr. Mikey, Mr. Ronaldo Bernard, and the Government Information Service, We are grateful for the excellent coverage and the documentation of this momentous occasion. We also wish to thank each of you who have joined us today, with special mention of the beneficiaries, persons with disabilities, at-risk youth and women, the people of Grenada. UNDP, with the support of the government of Grenada, will not relent in its effort to ensure the successful implementation of the EnGenDer project as we work together to create a better future for all. Embodied in the words of the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, let us remove physical and cultural barriers, build resilient societies, and create opportunities that truly leaves no one behind. I thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Aline. And now I declare the Enabling Gender Responsive Disaster Recovery, Climate and Environmental Resilience in the Caribbean, the EnGenDer project, officially open. Thank you everyone for attending, taking the time off. Thank you ministers, PSs. Thanks all. I invite you all to some refreshments at the back and also to view the rest of the equipment on the outside. Thank you and enjoy the rest of the afternoon.
Okay. This is a fruit punch, right? Okay.